The day my son-in-law called me a poor man's chauffeur, I decided to stop being the bank of the family, and by sundown I had already retitled their car, changed the deed, and cancelled the transfers, without a word to the people sipping champagne in my living room. Before we dive deeper, don't forget to subscribe and drop a comment letting us know where you're tuning in from. My name is Grigory. I am 68 years old, a grandfather of 2, and every morning I start my taxi shift at 5. Dawn is the best hour, the streets still cool and forgiving, the city rubbing its eyes awake. I do not play the radio like the younger drivers, I listen to the hum of tires and the occasional swallow of the engine. I used to sign off on steel contracts and argue with auditors. I used to have 55 people whispering my name with respect or fear as I walked the factory floor. Now I keep a tin of mints in the cup holder and a stack of fresh tissues for customers who need them more than a meter running. The truth is, I prefer it. In a company office, dignity stains easily, like coffee on a white shirt. In a car, a man can be exactly what he is, another person going from here to there, trying not to do harm. I like the old rituals, the recorded seatbelt chime, the sandpaper rasp of a receipt tearing free. I like the attention it demands and the attention it forgives. I like how people speak to me when they forget I am there. My wife, Anna, is the same age as me. We have been married for 45 years. I met her in a train car that smelled of orange peel and iron smoke. I still remember her hair in a long braid and her eyes traveling ahead of words, choosing them carefully before they were spoken. Our daughter, Elena, arrived after my first promotion, our son, Pavel, after the second. Pavel became a teacher and then a department head. He lives modestly with his wife and their books. Elena married a man named Mark. I welcomed Mark like a second son. He was tall, handsome, with the sloping shoulders of a swimmer and the easy handshake of someone taught to take things. He said he had a business mind. He said he did not like being overmanaged. He said he liked how our family did not push people. I remember the first time he asked me for a loan. The words were careful but the jaw was not. My daughter sat beside him, bright with embarrassment. It was for bridging, he said. It was a short-term gap, while he pivoted from a job that offended him to something more aligned with his strengths. I wrote a number on a folded envelope, and that became our ritual. He would describe the next alignment, and I would describe a number. If I am honest, I wanted to protect Elena from the world I had worked inside. I wanted to be the soft hands behind the curtain. I told myself the money was temporary. I told myself the best way to be useful in old age is to hold back the weather for the young. You can call it charity if you like, but charity done in silence becomes a habit. And old habits are faithful even when they outlive their use. When I retired, I had 2 houses. One was the apartment where Anna and I grew old. The other was an outer district house I renovated slowly and carefully, my walking project after I gave away my executive desk. I bought it with my name on the deed and let Elena and Mark live there rent-free, until they stabilized. I paid the utilities, for now. Their son, my grandson, Artyom, had a nursery with blue walls and a jungle of wooden animals on a shelf I sanded myself. When I started driving a taxi, it was partly boredom, partly pride, and partly a refusal to be one of the old men who dress up to walk the dog and treat the pharmacy as a social club. I like work. I like being tired for a reason. My hands shake less when they are asked to be useful. Even when customers do not look at me, I look at them and feel human again. On the morning of the barbecue, I drove a nurse to the hospital. Her shoes were the color of cherries crushed underfoot. She told me that patients who cannot see the sky heal slower. She said, it costs nothing to wheel a person toward a window. The words stayed with me. I wheeled myself toward a window lot, brought fresh bread, tomatoes from our balcony, and a bottle of wine my brother had given me. I took off my driver's cap and put on the old linen hat that makes Anna laugh. The backyard was dressed for declarations, white paper lanterns, a rented grill that puffed like a locomotive, a folding table with too much glassware for a family that never washed it properly. Mark wore a shirt the color of new money and sunglasses that seemed to darken the sun itself. Elena was thin from diet and worry and pleased to show that thinness. Artyom chased a ball through trampled grass. Anna, who refuses to sit in the shade when she can sit in the sun, arranged small bowls and listened to everyone without committing to an expression. Neighbors came. Old friends of Elena came. One of Mark's business associates came and circled the food with the glance of someone measuring losses. I fetched ice from the kitchen and noticed that our name was still on every bill stuffed into the drawer: water, electricity, the alarm company. The Wi-Fi bill had jumped since last month. The streaming bills multiplied like mushrooms after rain. I do not know what made me open the drawer fully and lift the stack. Perhaps it was the nurse's voice, or the way sunlight makes the truth look like dust, or the odd chime my phone made as a transfer went through. I sifted through the bills and found one I did not recognize. A luxury clothing store. My card. Another for a watch. Another for a hotel I had no need to sleep in. My name was a river feeding other people's lakes. Back in the yard, Mark was opening a third bottle. He tapped a knife against the glass like a master of ceremonies. "A toast," he said, and pointed the blade at me. "To our family patriarch. To a long, honest life. He still drives a taxi to stay young." Can you believe that? People smiled. The word taxi fell between them like a fallen leaf, harmless, slightly dirty. Then he said, with a grin too big, "It is good to have a driver in the family. We always have a ride." His friend laughed. The laugh had the same shape as a cough, which made it seem compassionate when it was not. I felt the heat climb my neck. Anna looked at me over her cup. It was not a warning, or a plea. It was a look that says, "You can always choose." I smiled instead of bending the room. I raised my glass. I told a little story about my first day on the job, a rainy day, heavy with unhappy music. How a passenger wept and did not explain why. How I turned off the meter and drove him to the river and waited. When he came back, he said, "Thank you for not asking." Mark clapped. "See? A man of service," he said. "No shame in working. It is just not for everyone," he added, eyebrows lifting toward his friend, landing on Elena. "Some of us have, what did I call it, bigger plays to make." He announced that his newest venture was going to change the way people think about staffing. He declared that investors were circling. He spoke like a politician inside a mirror. Elena's jaw tightened. She performed Pride like a violinist playing through a broken string. Later, while carrying plates inside, I noticed the kitchen sink had an unwashed forgiveness to it. I set down the plates, opened the drawer again, chose 3 unfamiliar envelopes, and slipped them under my hat. At the sink, I held my wrists under cold water. I counted to 15. When I pulled the papers from my hat in the bedroom, they were damp along the edges, like fish pulled from a river. On top was the bill for the car insurance. The car was the one I had gifted them after Artyom was born. The one I was told would help them drive to interviews, daycares, all the reasons cars are useful to families. My name was still on the title. I had kept it there because it felt safer. Under it was a second card authorization. Mark had requested a duplicate of my bank card, for my convenience. Under that was a brochure from a local notary office. The brochure had a circle drawn around a service called Simplified Deed Transfer. I ate a forkful of potato salad and felt nothing. I walked back outside. When Mark put his arm around me for a photograph, I smiled again and smiled so well that even my eyes played along. He smelled like expensive herbs and fear carefully bleached. At sunset, Mark made another toast. He raised his glass toward the house. We could not have done any of this without the support of Elena's old man, he said. Truly. He is the wind under our wings. Wind, his friend echoed. And a taxi. That is quite a breeze. What job is a job for poor people, he added in a voice meant to be private and intentionally not. Taxi driver, right? Mark laughed. Small cash, big stories, he said. Then he added, eyes on me because cruelty needs an audience. I always tell the kid, study hard, or else you will drive strangers around and smell like lemon disinfectant. Elena said nothing. She arranged black olives on a plate as if they remembered how much she used to love me and could not find the courage to speak. I finished my wine. I raised my hand the way I did when my workers argued loudly on a factory floor. The hand remembers even when the body wants to forget. If we are making declarations, I said, I will make one. Ah, the driver speaks, Mark said. Starting today, I said softly, I will no longer support this household financially. The bridge has become a road with no end. I do not fund roads without maps. Elena looked at me as if I had changed languages. Mark chuckled. His friend, more honest than him, looked away. Mark widened his arms. We understand. Things are tight, he said, magnanimous. Tomorrow is a new day. He looked at Elena as if to comfort her and to display himself doing it. I nodded, and then I did the thing I am not proud of but not ashamed of either, I kept my mouth closed about the rest. I let them keep their dignity a few hours longer while mine returned to me like a dog who had been chasing someone else's car. By sundown, I had done the work no one saw. I went upstairs and called my bank. I asked for a freeze on the extra card. I asked for a list of transfers to an account number ending in digits I recognized from a photograph of Mark holding a champagne flute and the reflection of his bank card in his sunglasses. I ordered printed statements. I canceled 3 scheduled payments. I told the polite woman on the line that my age was not a permission. She agreed. We ended the call between us like adults who had shared a wait well. Next, I called a friend from the old factory, a man who had started as a night guard and now ran a small courier company. The kind of man who knows how to move paper like a river moves silt. He sent a motorbike to the notary office with my identification and a letter I wrote by hand on the side of the bed. I authorized the deed change on the second house back to me, fully and solely, lifting a contingency clause I had foolishly left in. I asked for an expedited process and paid cash over the phone for the favors that are not favors but kindness remembered. When the courier called back 2 hours later, he said, "It is done. The stamp is fresh." Then I called the municipal office to note a change of occupancy. In the morning, I would change the locks. I messaged a locksmith who answers at odd hours. I used my old director voice once, a voice like a closed door opening just enough for a man to pass through if he hurries. After that, I sat in their guest room and looked at our family photographs. I saw myself jumping into a lake with Elena on my back, both of us laughing like we had done something illegal. I saw Mark holding Artyom, guiding his tiny hand to throw the first stone into the first puddle. I saw Anna and me dancing at our 40th anniversary with plates clattering in the kitchen and children running around like the future trying to catch itself. I went downstairs. The party had thinned. Those left were the ones who eat last and talk longer. Mark was telling a story about how hard it is to be surrounded by small minds. He saw me and welcomed me into the circle as if I were a promoted man. He touched the rim of my glass with his. "Cheers to the long game," he said. "To the long game," I said. In the morning, I woke before anyone and stepped out to the street. The air had that chilly purity that makes you think you are a better person just for breathing it. I walked past the corner store where the owner had once extended me credit without asking, past the park where children were already arguing about nothing in a way that made it sound like everything. I called the towing company and gave them the plate number of the car I had bought for Elena and Mark. I told them to take it to my garage, not theirs. I told them I would meet them there and sign papers. When the tow truck arrived, I watched the driver tighten straps like reins on a horse. He asked me if it was a repossession. I said, "It is a correction." He nodded without judgment. Men who work early see all kinds of corrections. By the time I came back, the locksmith had arrived, a man with quick hands and calm eyes. He changed the locks the way a doctor changes a dressing. He did not ask why. He asked me to test each key. I tested them and pocketed the spares. "If anyone asks," he said, "you can say you lost faith." He smiled slightly. I did not. Inside, the house pulled a long breath and held it. Elena and Mark were still asleep. I boiled water for tea, the old, noisy kettle that screams regret. When the alarm beeped with the new code, it sounded like a question. I answered it with a few numbers that spelled out a date only Anna and I would remember, the day we eloped against our parents' advice and learned how to be loyal to our own decisions. Anna met me on the front step. She had taken the early bus from our apartment. She carries herself like a decision too. "You are sure?" she asked. "I am sure," I said. "I have been unsure long enough." She nodded. "Then do not speak more than you have to," she said. "You are best when you say the thing only once." We made breakfast. When Elena came down in the robe I had bought for her birthday and Mark in shorts that looked more expensive than his last month's rent, they were both still the children they choose to be when life asks them to answer. Elena hugged me. "Papa," she said, relieved for reasons she could not name. "We have a busy day. Mark has a meeting. We have to pick up Artyom from his camp." "You will do as you must," I said. Mark poured coffee and winced at the taste like a person tasting truth for the first time. He looked at the new keys on the counter. He looked at the front door, then back at me. He had the survival instinct of a fox and the courage of a cat. "What is this?" he asked carefully. I set my phone on the table and, with the calm I have used with machine operators standing too close to a moving belt, I opened my bank application. I turned the screen toward them. It listed the newly cancelled standing orders, utilities for this address, streaming services, 2 private club memberships I did not know existed. Then I showed him the authorized extra card, now frozen, the transfers to his account, and the monthly insurance for a car that now sat on a flatbed on its way to my garage. I said, "You will not spend my money anymore." Elena's face went pale and then flushed and then pale again, a tide with nowhere to go. "Papa," she said, "this is temporary." "Temporary has a birthday," I said. This one had 3. Mark set his cup down. He put his palms up as if he were surrendering to the kind of enemy who still lets you keep your shoes. We used the money to invest, he said. It was going to double, triple. You will benefit too. I shook my head. I do not invest in people who mock me for working, I said. I do not invest in lives that are all display and no foundation. He laughed then. It was a short, mean sound. What kind of man brags about driving a taxi? It is a job for poor people, Grigory. I felt, very distinctly, the moment my love for my daughter and my patience for this man parted and stood like two people on a platform, letting a train pass between them. On my way down through life, I have learned to count, money, deadlines, the number of times a person can spit in your face while calling it rain. This was the last number. You are both unemployed, I said. You have been each day for more than a year. I pulled printed statements from the folder and slid them across the table. You have used my cards to pay for a private gym you never attend and a meal plan that delivers oysters to a door that does not belong to you. You have used my name to open lines I did not grant. You have sold old jewelry and replaced it with new jewelry and called the exchange investment. I have the invoices. I have the signatures. One of them is almost mine. Elena looked at the papers as if they were written in salt. We meant to tell you, she whispered. Anna spoke then. Her voice is soft even when it carries weight. Daughter, she said, you used your father's kindness like a staircase and now pretend the landing belongs to you. Elena's mouth trembled. She was my baby again, but in a room where being a baby could not help her. Mama, she said, you do not understand. Everyone we know lives like this. Then change who you know, Anna said. I stood. I slid a thin white envelope toward them. Inside were 2 copies of a notice, one for each of them. You will leave this house today, I said. Your clothes and your child's belongings will be packed with care. You can collect them from our apartment. You will also receive an itemized account of what I have paid these past 3 years. I do not need it back. I will carry that loss like a scar and use it to recognize other wounds. But you will leave. Mark stood too. His face had the strange sheen men get when they are about to choose between dignity and shouting. He chose shouting. You cannot throw your daughter out, he said. I can and I am, I said. Because I am throwing you out. He laughed, louder. You cannot do this. We will take you to court. We will tell everyone you are senile. We will claim elder abuse from. He stopped, realizing the sentence had nowhere to go. Anna stepped closer to him until he had to see the years in her eyes. You will not speak to my husband that way in his house, she said. You will not speak about courts as if they are wolves you keep as pets. Elena reached for me. Papa, please, she said, do not humiliate us. We will fix it. We will change. You will fix it by starting to be honest, I said. And since honesty needs a witness, I am inviting one. I walked to the back door and opened it. In came my neighbor, a modest, small man with a camera he bought with his own money after working double shifts for 4 years. He works for a community paper. He is not cruel. He is careful. He had been waiting outside because I asked him to. Mark's eyes widened. You invited a photographer. Not a photographer, I said. A record. This is private, Mark said, a smear of panic in the word. When you spent my money, were you private? I asked. When you stood in this yard and insulted my work, were you private? When you took my car to a hotel that rents rooms by the hour, were you private? Elena made a sound, a small animal sound that cracks the ribs of a father. I turned away from her so that my hands did not tremble. The neighbor did not raise his camera. He waited for permission. His courtesy was a spice in the air. "This is not for the paper," I said to him. "This is for the people who will say later that they did not know, for the aunt with advice and the cousin with rumors. Please record only that the house is mine, that keys are exchanged, that they leave without damage made." He nodded. Mark puffed up, then deflated. He looked at Elena. He looked at the door he no longer controlled. He looked at the life he had curated like a stage set and saw, perhaps for the first time, the scaffolding behind it. I sent a message to Artyom's camp to tell them his mother and father would be delayed and that his grandparents would collect him instead. The camp director replied with a heart. "Some people understand without you needing to explain." We packed their things with respect. When Elena tried to take a framed photograph of the four of us by the lake, Anna gently removed it from her hands. "This will wait for you to come for dinner," she said. "When you come." "Not if, but when." "But not to this house." We carried suitcases to the curb. Mark refused to take two of them because they were cheaply made. I carried them instead. Down the steps I replaced myself, across the walk I had pressure washed last spring while Elena slept in. The neighbor took a single photograph of the door as I turned the new key. Elena cried in the way a person cries when the childhood she has been extending into adulthood suddenly ends. She did not speak. Mark spoke enough for both. He said I would be sorry. He said I had ruined my family. He said I had chosen a taxi over a legacy. He said the word legacy as if it were a chess piece he could move with one finger. I closed the door. I leaned my forehead against the wood. My hands remembered heavier doors and heavier knocks. This was lighter and it hurt more. Anna put her hand on my back. We stood there like a coat on a hook and the person whose shoulders fit inside it. After we drove to pick up Artyom, I took a call from my bank confirming the stop orders. They asked, politely, if I needed help disputing the charges. I said no. I am an old man. I choose what debts to carry and which ones to drop. This one I would carry like a brick in a pocket to remember how deep the river gets when you forget where the bridge ends. At the camp gate, Artyom ran to us with paint on his cheeks and a wooden airplane in his hand. "Grandpa," he said, "we learned how to make things fly." "We are learning too," I said. "Just in a different class." We took him to our apartment. Anna made pancakes. He told us an elaborate story about a friend named Timur who had invented a game where stones are soldiers and grass is the sea. He did not ask where his parents were. Children live in the present like monks. That evening, I parked the taxi and sat in silence for a while beneath the plane trees. The meter was off. The dashboard ticked as it cooled. I smelled the lemon disinfectant Mark apparently thinks is shameful and decided I like it. It is the smell of something not pretending to be more than itself. The call came after dark. Elena's voice was small. She said, "Papa, can we come by?" "Yes," I said. "Just you." She came alone, without Mark. She stood in our doorway and did not cross the threshold. Some thresholds must be stepped over slowly. She apologized for words she had not spoken and for ones she had. She confessed the unemployment in a flat tone and described how it feels to chase a lifestyle that runs faster than your legs. "I thought success could be worn," she said. "Like a coat." "It cannot," I said. "It can be borrowed for a photograph and then the sleeves tear." She pressed her lips together. I do not know what to do, she said. Start small, I said. Tell the truth 10 times in a row. Work one job you do not like and do it well. Say no to friends who only like you when you look expensive. And Mark? She asked. I cannot tell you what to do with your husband, I said. But I can tell you there is dignity in a man who can hold a small job without feeling small. You must decide if he can. She nodded. She left. The hallway smelled of boiled cabbage from someone else's dinner and the old newspapers on the step below. I stood there until her footsteps disappeared. Days passed. I drove my taxi and learned the city all over again. There is a beauty in honest repetitions. I learned where the sun strikes the river like a match. I learned the morning shift of bakers and the evening shift of tired students. I learned that people confess to a stranger when the stranger looks in the same direction as the road and not at their face. A week later, the public humiliation arrived not with a photograph in the paper but with something smaller and more permanent, the truth moving through the family like wind through a tree. It started with my sister asking why Elena had returned to our apartment with suitcases. It moved to my cousin at the corner store, who noticed the stop orders on the account he manages for me, because he saw the cigar box where I keep receipts now as if they could add up to character. It ended with friends in the courtyard who put together what they had always suspected: when someone lives richly without working, someone else underwrites it. Mark tried to control the story. He called my brother and spoke about elder confusion. He told a neighbor that I had become irrational. He decided to forget that people know me longer than they know him. The neighbor with the camera visited me with a bag of pears. He told me he had been stopped by Mark on a sidewalk and called it gossip. He had not raised his voice, he had smiled the way a man smiles when he is richer than the person insulting him. In the middle of the second week, Elena and Mark stood in front of our apartment building. It was raining, a kind of silver rain that makes everything look cleaner than it is. They did not come upstairs. They did not ring the bell. They stood by the door, wet, hoping I would appear. I did because I was leaving for a night shift. They looked smaller than they had ever looked, and younger, and older. Papa, Elena said, we need help. What kind? I asked. We cannot make rent, she said. We do not know where to go. Work, I said. There will be a job for both of you within 3 days if you walk into 5 places a day and tell the truth. Mark's jaw tightened. I am not taking a job washing dishes, he said. I have a plan. If the plan feeds your child this week, I will listen, I said. Otherwise, wash the dishes. He stared at me as if he had never met me before. You are cruel, he said. You always were, only now you finally show it. I am honest, I said. And I have practice. Elena wiped her face with the wet sleeve of her coat. She looked at Anna standing behind me, then back at me. Mama, Papa, she said, please. Anna came forward and handed her a small envelope. Inside was a list of resources: jobs hiring that week, a community kitchen, a church that collects clothes and does not advertise it, a number for a counselor who charges little and listens much. There was also a single bill, enough for 1 week of food if spent without pride. Elena nodded. She said thank you through a mouth trying not to cry. Mark did not thank us. He looked at the envelope as if it were a riddle he had not learned the trick to solve. Remember, I said, we do not fund lifestyles anymore. We support beginnings. They left. I watched them through the rain and felt, all at once, both a great old sadness and something like peace. The rain slowed. The air smelled of iron and the new green that comes even when no one deserves it. That night, an older woman with a plastic bag full of onions asked me if I had change for a large bill. I did. I counted it into her hand carefully, slowing at the last few notes, making sure the math respected us both. She told me she liked how neat my car was. She said her husband used to drive a taxi when the children were small. He would come home with stories about men in suits who made him wait in running cars until their shoes were dry enough to step into weather. I told her I had worked in suits and preferred rain. We laughed. When I got home after midnight, Anna was awake reading a battered book about the history of orchards. She likes to know how things grow even if we have no land for them to grow on. I sat down beside her and told her what had happened. "Do you feel relief?" she asked. "I feel exact," I said. "Like a tool that finally fits the task." She closed the book and put her hand over mine. "We raised them to be honest," she said. "We did not raise them to be rich." Then she added, "Sometimes the world confuses the two." In the weeks that followed, Elena found a job at a tailoring shop, taking hems, repairing loose buttons, learning again how a working day can repair the self it uses. Her hands, always graceful, became precise with purpose. She stopped wearing the rings that had once tried to become purpose. She came by on Sundays to drink tea and bring Artyom to sit on the floor and play cars with me until he fell asleep with his head on my thigh. She did not ask for money. I sometimes slipped a few bills into a book she borrowed, and she returned the book a week later with exactly the same number of bills pressed like flowers between pages. We laughed quietly over this ritual as if it were the punchline to a long joke we were learning to enjoy. Mark disappeared for a while and then appeared washing cars 2 districts away. The first time we saw him, I did not speak. The second time, I greeted him like anyone else who was cleaning the dirt from something that must go back into the world. He mumbled. The third time, he met my eyes and nodded. Change is not dramatic in the people we know. It is a series of small head movements we must stay awake to see. Once, a man left a briefcase in my back seat. It was stuffed with cash and fear. I drove it across town. He opened the door, counting apologies before he counted money. He offered me a reward. I told him the reward was not teaching his children that luck looks like theft. He made a face that tried to be a laugh and could not find the strength. Another day, a boy climbed in and asked how to make a life. I told him the truth costs less than pretending and pays less at first and then more forever. He said that sounded like advice for poor people. I said that is exactly who need it most. On a cold afternoon, I parked the taxi and stood near the river. The water moved with the patient arrogance of something that knows you will come back for it. I took out my phone and looked at photographs taken with the neighbor's careful eyes. They were simple: a door, a key changing hands, a curb with suitcases, 2 faces turned away, a sky the color of tin. He had sent them to me only as a reminder that records are kind when they tell only what they must. I sent one photograph to Elena with a message: "This is not the end of our love. It is the end of a way of living that made our love smaller." She replied with a picture of a hem she had sewn very straight. "Practice," she wrote. "I am learning." Today, months later, I start my shift before dawn. I pick up a baker, a man with flour under his nails and a capacity for silence that feels like respect. I drop him at the corner of his shop where the air already smells like sugar trying to be bread. I watch him cross the street, his shoulders steady. I think about my father, who worked his whole life hammering metal into shapes that needed his hands and then did not remember them when new machines arrived. He still sat with pride at the end of each day and called the day a good one if he was tired in the right places. When my shift ends, I drive past the house I reclaimed. It looks the same from the road, too many lanterns stored under the porch, a trampled yard, the fence I keep meaning to repair when the money and the desire align. I do not stop. The house does not need me to explain what it is or who owns it. It is enough that it stands with the door properly shut and the air inside undisturbed by lies. On Saturday, Elena and Artyom come over. She brings a cake she did not buy. It leans slightly to one side like a person learning to stand after a long illness. We sit at our kitchen table. The afternoon light is gentle. When Mark knocks, he waits after one knock, not two. He looks thinner. He smells like the cleaning products he works with, and there is a kind of dignity in that smell that would offend a younger, sillier version of him. He asks if he can come in. He asks if he can sit. He asks if we can talk. He does not ask for money. He says he has found work that he does not like but that he can do. He says he is sorry like a person who has practiced the words without looking at themselves while saying them, but keeps trying anyway. I listen. I do not praise him. I do not punish him. I do not make his story smaller or bigger than it is. After they leave, Anna and I wash dishes. We do not speak for a while because some silences are not empty, they are full of weather passing. Then she says, "You did what your father would have done." "I did what I should have done earlier," I say. She dries a plate. "Then do not spend energy on regret," she says. "Spend it on doing now." We take a walk before the evening news, our steps measured, our hands warm in each other's. In the courtyard, someone has left a box of clothes labeled "free." I pull out a jacket that would fit Mark and a small sweater that looks like one Artyom will outgrow this winter and love until then. We do not take them. We leave them for someone who needs surprise more than we do. On the way back upstairs, we pass our neighbor with the camera. He is photographing a sparrow in the rain gutter. He says, "You know, Grigory, truth is not a weapon. It is a ladder." "No," I say, smiling. "It is both. The trick is in how you hold it." That night, I count the money the taxi has brought in. It is not a fortune, and it does not need to be. I put aside the part that pays the bills and the part that feeds us and the part that allows a small reward now and then. I look at my hands. They are old. The nails are clean. They have not forgotten machines and signatures and the feeling of a young child placing all his trust in your thumb. Before sleep, I write a note I will give to Artyom when he is older. There is no shame in honest work. There is only shame in shame itself. I imagine him reading this one day and thinking that his grandfather drove a taxi and was proud. I am thinking of the last time I saw my father hold a tool. He had arthritis by then. He picked up a small hammer and lay it back down, slowly, deliberately, as if showing the tool it could rest now. He looked at me and said, "You save a family not by paying every bill but by paying attention." I did not save my family entirely. It is not a thing we can do. We can only save moments, and that must be enough. I saved the moment when I refused to be laughed at for the way I choose to contribute to the world. I saved the moment when my daughter started to rebuild, not a lifestyle but a life. I saved the moment when my wife looked at me and saw not a man who had given too much for too long but a man who had finally done the right thing exactly. Weeks later, just as summer is folding its warm shirts into cooler drawers, I see them again at our door. Elena and Artyom are tidy and tired, the way decent people look when they are moving forward. Mark stands slightly behind them. He does not have a speech ready. He has learned, perhaps, that speeches do not change locks. He asks if he can carry the cake. He asks if he can set the table. He asks if he can take out the trash. He asks nothing of my wallet. We sit together. We eat the cake that leans only a little. We tell small stories. When the conversation threatens to turn large and dangerous, we walk it back with a joke about the taxi and a long argument about how to ideally slice cucumbers. We do not declare forgiveness. We let it happen like evening, a slow blue creeping in that finally turns the room kind. Much later, I receive a message from someone I do not know well, one of the people who were sipping champagne in my living room that day. It says, "I heard what happened. You were cruel." I delete it. Then I write back not to the sender but to myself, in the small notebook I keep in the glove compartment for when I must speak with myself as if I am a passenger. If your kindness is indistinguishable from cowardice, it is neither. On my last fare before the story I am telling you becomes simply the life I am living, a young man with a new suit sits in the back and says into his phone, "We can afford it. My father-in-law will pay." I look at him in the rearview mirror. I see a familiar house behind me in the distance even when it is not there. I do not preach. I drive him to his destination. When he pays, I give him his change and a receipt and the quiet he did not know he needed. He says, "Thanks, driver." And I say, "You are welcome." He leaves the door open a fraction too long. I reach back and shut it gently. The click sounds like a small truth coming to rest in exactly the place it always belonged. Then I turn on my signal, look over my shoulder to make sure the lane is clear, and pull back into the traffic of a city that keeps teaching me how to be a proud member of it.
Hello everyone, and thank you for watching. I truly hope you enjoyed listening to this story as much as I enjoyed creating it. If you did, please consider liking the video and subscribing to the channel to help support the creation of more stories like this. Have a great day or evening.